Good days we see, let us rejoice in peace and loyalty, and still despise the factious noise of those that vainly try to undermine our happiness, that they may by it get. Knavery has great increase when honesty does set, but let us baffle all their tricks, our king and country serve, and may he never thrive that like sedition in reserve. Then let each in his station rest, as all good subjects should, and he that otherwise designs, may he remain unblessed. May traitors ever be deceived in all they undertake, and never by good men believe. May all the plots they make fall heavy on themselves, and may they see themselves undone, and never have a happy day that would the king dethrone.
Guys, so today we're going to be doing a chill video. Chill doesn't really have anything to do with monarchy per se. It's just I really enjoyed reading this book, Samurai William. There's some pretty interesting topics in it that I'd like to talk about. And since we're going to be talking about Japan a bunch, I wore my custom-made Yukio Mishima shirt just for the occasion. So great book. Really, really liked it. I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights. First of all, the Nephilim are in it. So that's pretty crazy. That's not what I was expecting. And what's funny is the guy who writes it doesn't even try to he just presents their journal entries. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. William Adams is the guy who will become Samurai William. There's actually a part of Tokyo that's named after him. There's a shrine that's dedicated to him where they pray for his soul in Tokyo. He's very well known. He was actually a big part of Japanese society, which is crazy. And he was an English adventurer. He went out with a Dutch ship that when they were sailing, they ran into all kinds of problems. They lost most of the ships in the Armada as they were attempting to sail to China for trade. Well, they go through the Straits of Magellan, and they run into these 10 or 11 foot tall giants. You can guess what they eat if you're familiar with the Nephilim. There's also normal sized people with them. But yeah, there are these 10, 11 foot red haired giants that are digging up bodies and taking them to feasts. And so several hundred of them in this armada that Williams is a part of die in the Straits of Magellan to these Nephilim. So that was really weird, unexpected. Like I said, the author doesn't even try to dismiss that or whatever. Although I will say this is crazy. So I read this book recently, which I'm going to cover at some point. Great book. But I did not know that there is an entire corner of academia that literally devotes itself to trying to prove that Cannibalism does not exist and has never existed, and that it's all lies and it's all made up. So the same people who want to hide the existence of giants, Nephilim, also want to hide the existence of other unsavory aspects of human existence. There's a bunch of them. It doesn't matter how many eyewitness accounts you have. It doesn't matter how many interviews with people who did it. They try to cover this up because, hey, this is really uncomfortable. This obviously doesn't represent what we think the tribes were like or whatever. But we'll get to all that when we cover the book Thamus, which is really good. I liked it. I have a few minor quibbles, but I've got quibbles with almost everyone I meet and almost everything I read, it doesn't get in the way of me enjoying them. All right, so that was interesting. That's in there. And then so they arrive in Japan by accident, and when Samurai William gets there, he has this is crazy. So this is where the Jesuit part comes in. The Jesuit cover-up doesn't have anything to do with the Nephilim, unfortunately. That would be super juicy. I'm sure somewhere you could make that connection. Just statistically, the Jesuits are always involved in something horrible. Um, so uh, when they get to Japan, at this point, this was something I did not know about. So I had watched the movie Silence, which is a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it. It's a little tough to watch. Honestly, the book was a little bit harder to read because it covers that period. Um, so it's this is a this very early 1600s. James the First is king of England, and when they get to Japan, they're shipwrecked. They're dying. You know, Williams is one of the few men on the ship that can still stand up, and everybody's dying of scurvy and all this other stuff. They've been at sea for like 2 years or something. Something crazy. They've sailed across the Pacific, and uh, so they're when they get washed up on shore, the Jesuits have been there for decades, and the Jesuits realize that these are English and Dutch sailors who are Protestant. Well, what the book says, and this is pretty crazy, let this be a lesson to a lot of people out there. The Jesuits lied to the Japanese and told them that all of Europe was united under the Pope, and that there was just one Christian group, which was them, of course. So pretty underhanded. When they figure out that these guys that have just survived, this crazy voyage, who are dying and sick, shipwrecked, basically, uh, what's their first response? Take a wild guess what the Jesuits want to do. Oh, hey, listen here, local Japanese lord. Those guys are pirates. You need to kill them quickly. Before they talk, you need to kill them. Crucify them. Literally crucify them. Because that's the way the Japanese like to kill pirates and stuff. Uh, and so Williams and the Dutch and the Protestant sailors are like, wait, what? and and so that ends up not happening. Actually, gets spared by the man who will later become the shogun, Ieyasu Tokugawa, and uh, Williams never forgot that. A big reason the Jesuits will later allege, and I think they've got a pretty good case, that William Adams is the reason why the stuff in the movie Silence happened. It's the reason why so many Japanese Catholics were killed. Because the Jesuits, in order to cover up their lie that they had told, wanted to kill these shipwrecked sailors because they were Protestants, because they would prove that the Jesuits were lying. And actually, it goes into the Jesuit conversion process of Japan. They had about 150,000 converts at the time that William Adams and his crew washed up on shore. And the way they got them is just like, it's fascinating to me. There's so many strange things about it. So I've got another book that I'd like to cover at some point. I got to get it back from my father-in-law. It's called Fish on Fridays. I'll tie this in. In that book, I was shocked by how already in like the 1300s, the Catholic monks were already relaxing all their fasting rules. They were already eating meat. Fish was kind of like the exception at first. And then it got to where they were eating basically fish and meat every day, like very early, like before the Reformation. And in this book, this is early 1600s, the Jesuits and the Franciscans and the monks and stuff, they're all eating meat when they come to Japan. And actually, they get told by, I can't remember his name, but, sort of the strong man of the Jesuits that shows up and starts running the mission. He revamps everything. So he's like, we're not making enough converts. This is decades before Williams gets there, and he's like, he says we've got to reorganize. The Japanese don't eat beef. They don't eat a bunch of food, or they don't eat a bunch of meat. So he starts forcing his monks and his Jesuits to not eat the food that they're used to. He's making them use chopsticks. He's making them dress like the locals. He's making them learn the language, all these other things. And some of which is like, okay. I mean, that's weird, of course, to remember, like, oh, yeah, the Catholics always present as like, we're the superior this, we're the superior that. Okay, whatever. But your monks aren't even trying to fast from meat. And still today, vast majority of Orthodox monks are still eating, you know, like we used to in the ancient world, where the monks would fast. Like many of them have never eaten meat at all. Maybe they'll have fish or something like that, but I mean, Orthodox monks have always been much stricter about this stuff, and this started a long time ago. Um, so that's just one of those things because I'm making this video specifically for my friend. We reconnected after years and years talking about the Nephilim and the Book of Enoch and stuff like that. And so I told him, I said, well, I'm going to put out a video on this book that I've been reading. I think you'll really like it. And part of our thing that we talked about was who is a Christian, because he's not Orthodox, right? He's Protestant. And he said he has a hard time coming to terms with the idea that a Catholic might be a Christian. And basically what I told him was, well, I was like, um, I'm not telling you what to believe on this, but there's a lot of stuff about the Catholics that is very strange, very odd, stuff that they kind of hide from people, kind of like the Jesuits did from the Japanese. There's a lot of bluster, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of we've got the numbers and whatever. And once you kind of start poking the edifice, it's like it's not quite what you're cracking it up to be. Um, most of your liturgies suck, like they're horrible. They look like Protestant services. I've been to them. Okay. So there's this constant sort of kingdom of this world, bluster, lie, that a lot of these guys, particularly the Jesuits, are doing. Now, I'm not trying to cast shade on them, unlike the individual Japanese Christians, because a lot of them, I mean, God have mercy on their souls. They went to some absolutely horrific deaths, and they would not renounce the name of Christ. Okay? So they're outside the church. I leave that to God's mercy. It's very hard to read about the kind of stuff that happened in the movie Silence. That happened like pretty regularly. But the Jesuits brought it on themselves. The Catholics brought it on themselves. That's what I came away with after reading this book. And actually, there's a lot of cautionary tales for today. Because well, okay, anyways, let me get back to the story a little bit. So, Williams ends up being spared because the Japanese, Ieyasu Tokugawa specifically, realizes that he knows navigation, he knows something about shipbuilding, he knows about geography and cartography, and so the Japanese are very interested in these things. They spare his life for that reason, and he ends up being a huge resource to them, and ends up becoming a samurai. Now that's later. Also, something very interesting is that right when they show up, there's a huge battle. It's very famous, actually, which I did not pull up an image of. I forgot about that. But there's the Battle of Sekigahara, which is like a huge, I mean, it's considered the most important battle in Japanese history. And Ieyasu Tokugawa, he's over there with 70,000 men, and he's facing off against 70,000 men, and he's facing off against about 80,000. So we've got 150,000 men in battle. It rains the day of the battle. Everyone's fighting in mud up to their knees in a fog. Okay, so this is a huge battle. It's like apocalyptic. And, everybody's, sinking in mud up to their knees. They can't see. There's fog everywhere. On top of that, the other thing that kept Williams and his people alive is that they had 19 cannons and a bunch of gunpowder and shot on their ship, which Ieyasu takes, and that's part of why he wins the Battle of Sekigahara. This is the battle where Miyamoto Musashi gets his start, which I had to double check on it. For some reason, I've been under the impression he was on the losing side, but he was actually on the winning side. Tokugawa. At least that's what my research said. I'm not sure why I thought the other way, but anyways, so um, when they so these cannons that just happened to show up like months before the battle prove pivotal in helping win and changes the course of Japanese history. This is very fortuitous and auspicious, you know. So the Japanese are really interested in William Adams now and in what he has to offer. And he's kind of showed up at just the right time. And them deciding not to do what the Jesuits said and kill him ends up being a huge deal for the history of Japan. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. So the Jesuits, that guy, um, their strongman, I'll have to look up his name again, but he, the one who got them to change all their customs or whatever, told them, hey, you guys have to bathe because the Japanese are actually very clean, so you guys actually need to bathe and like take care of yourself. Ooh. And then everybody stops getting sick. Oh, weird how that works. Anyways, but he also, so up until that point, in addition to them just kind of being these slobs, right? The one good thing that the Jesuits and the Franciscans were doing before that guy got there was that they actually were trying to take care of the poor and the lepers. So their hospital was just like full of lepers. Well, this scandalized the Japanese. They're like, they're unclean, they're untouchable, we have nothing to do with them. You must have some weird ulterior motive for helping these people. So when this new Jesuit guy shows up, he says, kick out all the lepers. Our hospitals, our physicians, they only work for like the highest nobility now because this is how we're going to win converts. So they do the opposite of what any normal Christian would do. What they had been doing before, which was to take care of the poor, the unfortunate, and the needy. Instead, they play up to the power structure. Ah, okay, we're getting off to a really bad start here. So all of a sudden they start making converts, right? Because now people are like, oh, well, now you're socially acceptable. And so it becomes okay. And, you know, some of the samurai lords convert and stuff like that. Um, and so the Jesuits become very arrogant and they start getting a lot of converts and they kind of start thinking we can do what we want. And that's already causing problems when William Adams shows up. So now William Adams is alive. He starts explaining when they ask him, like, why do these Portuguese, these Jesuits, why do they want you dead? Why do they hate you so much? And when he learns Japanese, he starts explaining, oh, well, there's been this thing called the Reformation, and Europe is actually split. And in the course of other conversations, after the Jesuits really try to hammer down on him, he goes, oh yeah, and by the way, I wouldn't trust these Jesuits because they're basically all working for like the Pope and the King of Spain. He's like, and I'll tell you this, any English king, in my country, we kick the Jesuits out because they've proved to just be foot soldiers for the Pope and for the King of Spain to take over the Kingdom of England. And I'm English, and so I support King James the First. And later trade missions will come. And so this kind of starts getting the Japanese a little bit worried. But he has to do it to save his own skin because the Jesuits are still trying to have him killed or sent away. They're trying to get rid of him. There was rumors that they tried to have him assassinated and stuff like that. Him and the other survivors of this shipwreck. I mean, it's total like cloak and dagger. It's just I hate the Jesuits, man. Like I hate them. There's like one Jesuit writer from the '60s that I like, and even he's got some weird stuff. But like the Jesuits are just bad news. Anytime I go to the history pages, okay, so the Jesuits bring on silence. They bring that on themselves. Uh, and one of the ways that they do that actually is by deciding to back a faction that's going to fight the shogun. And I kind of understand. I kind of get it. Like the Christians would have backed Constantine or whatever, right? We would have thrown our weight behind him. And if he would have been defeated, it would have been bad for us. But they picked a side, like all the lead up to this. So what happens is the reason the persecution really kicks off is because there's a very famous battle of Sekigahara, or not Sekigahara, of Osaka Castle. Osaka Castle is this huge. I mean, it's like got like 9 miles of walls. The walls are like 40 foot thick, and it's got 100,000 defenders, including most of the Christians in Japan. Like all the Christian samurai and stuff like that all come and hide out, and they're rebelling against the shogun. And they have all the Jesuits are behind them, all the Franciscans are behind them. They're flying Spanish flags and unfurling the cross, and this is going to be our dramatic showdown where Japan becomes Christian. And instead, they lose and they get slaughtered. And actually, in the lead up to the battle, there had been a bunch of incidents that were happening. Like, I mean, it's pretty clear in the book. It reminds me of St. Paul when he says, like, don't do stupid stuff because you'll be justly punished for it. Like, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that, like, everything, we're going to defend you. Um, because, like, for example, a guy gets caught counterfeiting money. Well, he's a Christian, a Japanese convert. And so they're crucifying him, and the friars and the Jesuits are all out there in their priestly garb being like, oh, he's suffering for Christ. And they're gathering the people together, and there's going to be an uproar. So all and they do this kind of stuff with like criminals over and over again. And so over and over, the Japanese authorities and Ieyasu specifically are like, wait, what? Kind of seems like you're working against law and order. And then when they find out that all the Christians have gone to Osaka Castle to join the fight against the shogun to create a political upheaval, they're like, okay, these people are dangerous. And so they're going to William Adams over and over, and they're asking him to clarify. They're like, now you're the same kind of Christian, right? He's like, no, 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 no. And he's like, has to get to the point. He gets to the point where he says, you know what? He said, to save his own skin, and at this point, other Englishmen have landed and have set up a little trading colony, which will end up being closed after like 13, 14 years. They don't do very well. That's a whole colorful story in and of itself, which I'm not going to get into today. But anyways, him and this little band of Englishmen and the Dutch, who are their buddies, that are their station is like a couple hundred yards away. They're having to defend, and at this point, Williams has a Japanese family. He has a daughter. He has a son. He has an estate. He's a samurai. Like, there's a lot of people depending on him. And so now he's got to explain this is why Protestantism is different from Catholicism. So he's having to explain over and over and over again all the differences and blah, blah, blah. And he has to become more and more kind of like, yeah, like these are bad people. Like, we fight them. This is right before the 30 Years' War, actually. So I jumped a little bit in the timeline. This is 1614. And William Adams is like, we have nothing to do with these people. In fact, if you wrote to King James I, I will write him a letter saying that a combined Japanese-English fleet should attack the Philippines where the Spanish are, because the Spanish are behind all this garbage. It didn't help matters that the Spanish governor of the Philippines came up to Japan not long before and basically was just completely arrogant, didn't want to do any of the court etiquette, whatever. It was just like, I serve the King of Spain and he is the ruler of the world, and you better let our Jesuits and Franciscan friars do whatever they want, you barbarian. Of course, the shogun's like, yeah, no. How about you go home? And I don't want to talk to you anymore. So you just see that, I hate to say it, but I see this on the internet, not from all Catholics, but from a certain like subset of Catholic apologists, like Cameron Rickard or whatever his name is. When that guy talks, I'm just like, dude, you need to shut up because you are destroying your own cause. You bluster, you make a lot of big claims, you're super arrogant. You're so stupid. This is just so obviously true. Catholicism. And I'm like, dude, calm down, back up. You're overstating your case. You're overselling what you've got. You don't have what you're saying that you got. You need to calm down. No. There are plenty of, thoughtful, pious Catholics that I'll listen to, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or, okay, yeah, that's a new way to look at that. Or, but there are tons of Catholic apologists that are not like that. Now, what I will say, just to not be unfair, is having read all this now, And okay, and after the Battle of Osaka Castle in 1614, they get defeated. There's like 100,000 people killed, right? 100,000, just bodies everywhere, so deep that you can walk across the river on bodies, as if on dry ground. That's what the chronicles say. So all this happens, and William Adams does manage to persuade the Japanese that, hey, we don't have anything in common with them. So this keeps the trade relationship with England alive. In fact, I thought this was pretty interesting. The Emperor of Japan actually sends, go ahead and move myself out of the way here. He actually sends two sets of samurai armor to King James I, which is still on display in the Tower of London. This is pretty cool. And these are the actual two suits of armor. Actually, they're very very famous. As soon as I looked them up. I was like, oh man, I bet they look cool. I look them up. I'm like, oh, I've seen those my whole life. You see pictures of these all the time. I had no idea that these were given to King James I. It's pretty cool. Um, yeah, I can see some like alternative history novel in my head now, where like Samurai James, Samurai King James. I don't know. It'd be fun. Okay, um, so the English still have good relationship with Ieyasu Tokugawa, but the Catholics basically take a huge beating, and the persecutions continue and continue and continue and continue and continue. Um, they're told, get out of the country, you need to leave, or you'll be killed. No one else is allowed to come in. No more Jesuits, no more Franciscans. And at first, they just ignore them. They start landing people, and they keep getting killed. And so, oh, they're martyrs, they're this or that. And more people come out of the woodwork, and they get killed, and blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the persecution just keeps ramping up until like Catholicism is basically dead in Japan. There are still groups that will kind of go underground and linger on, like the ones portrayed in the movie Silence. But the Jesuits, basically, by getting involved in politics, making their mission to support um, the specific geopolitical actors, like this is what cost them a Catholic Japan. Like their own. So now they try to blame it all on William Adams and claim he's a troublemaker and stuff. But as you read through all the accounts, you're like, you guys did this to yourself. You lied, you cheated, you refused to do like basic things that a Christian's supposed to do. And who knows what kind of syncretism was going on in addition to everything else. Because Francis Xavier actually started the mission in Japan, and had a pretty sizable following. But I remember reading years ago somewhere that like when he was in I think India or something like that trying to get converts, he was like, oh yeah, you can like put a statue of the Virgin Mary in with your rest of your pantheon. It's fine. And then we'll slow. It's like no. What? So who knows? I'm sure there's more details there. So because of this, this is why at the end of this period, Ieyasu dies, and then eventually William Adams will die as well, and Japan will end up closing down to all foreigners. This is the beginning of that famous period. I think it's called. Oh, let me I circled it in the book somewhere. Sakoku, the closed country. So basically, they kick out the Portuguese, they kick out the Spanish, the English leave kind of their own accord because their trade mission doesn't do well. Um, the Dutch get told you can have this one little island in Nagasaki Bay, but you have to give up all your stuff on the mainland and the other ports. So basically, all these foreigners, all these Catholics who had come in, had shot themselves in the foot by not acting like Christians, by being overconfident, overzealous, and arrogant, um, and by trying to by underhanded political machinations gain control of things. And then the Dutch and English, who were supposed to be friends and were friends for a long time, then they end up going to war with each other. And the Japanese see the Dutch and English fight, and the Dutch give the English, pretty good drubbing. And they're like, okay, so you guys aren't getting along either, and now the English want us to like help restore this British ship that got captured, but it was like captured out in the Spice Islands, and you guys are just trouble. All of you are just trouble, and so they end up just kicking everybody out. So I thought about this a lot because now I'm back on YouTube, so I kind of have a platform. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me in the book, in addition to all the fighting, the political machinations, the religious stuff, a lot of the Europeans that were there were just, I mean, it's absurd. It's like these people had no self control whatsoever, no respect, just complete tourists, right? They show up and they're being told like, "Hey, we might get killed if we like don't follow all the court protocol." And the English captain, and at this point, William Adams is a samurai. He's been in the court for years, and so he's telling him, he's like, "You need to chill. We need to follow all the proper protocol and the etiquette. We don't want to offend these people. Our lives are in their hands." "I will deliver this message to the emperor. I will hand it to him myself. I don't care." And almost causes a giant diplomatic scene. And there's so many instances of that in the book. Like people just can't control themselves. They run their mouths. They get in fights. I mean, it's just insane, right? And so this really rubs the Japanese the wrong way. Where that kind of hit is that right now Orthodoxy is on the ascendant. I mean, there's really no way around that. People can, you know, bring up the old statistics and the old numbers. The tremendous amounts of copium that we're getting from the Catholics and the Protestants. We're on the ascendant. We're in the public eye. Father Stephen DeYoung just went on Tucker Carlson, and Father Josiah's on there all the time. Like we're at this point where I think so far, things have been okay, but I'm not going to I'm not going to talk bad about anybody, because I really don't want to start any drama. But for people who are watching this, for people at my parish and stuff, like we have got to present a good image to the world outside, because that's where I see if there's anything that's going to roadblock us from making this country Orthodox, from winning this country for Jesus Christ, it's going to be that people thought, "Oh yeah, I'm Orthodox. We drink, so I can drink as much as I want." That's going to offend people. That's going to get you in trouble. That's going to make people not take the church seriously. You know, like, hey, I'm into all the right wing stuff, right? I'm a huge right winger. I mean, come on, right? But you need to be careful about what you say. You need to think through things before you say them out loud. There are certain topics you should probably avoid in public. I'm always flabbergasted by when people just open their mouths. I'm like, you did not just say that. Or you said that to a catechumen or an inquirer or whatever. We've got to keep a lid on all that. You need to be Orthodox first, let the other stuff come later. Okay? Whatever political stuff, we've got to be careful. Because I'm telling you, if you read history, if you look around at stuff that has happened before, you can destroy our witness very easily to your family, to your whatever. So I know this is supposed to be a chill video, but actually, no, like I read this book and I was like, I gotta say something. Um, I have to be very careful. Very, very careful. And I've done stuff that's offended people in the past. I've done stuff that was a poor witness for the Orthodox Church. I'm right there with you. I condemn myself as well. But I'm begging people, like we've got to be careful about what we do. Anyway, so back to the book. I'll get off my soapbox for a second. So William Adams ends up dying at 55. The country shuts down to outsiders. Um, and he actually grows up as this very poor man in England and ends up dying a samurai in Japan with a massive estate and a family, and he's quite wealthy and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty cool story. I really liked it. But yeah, Nephilim, Jesuit cover-up, and shenanigans. So anyways, guys, this was just a little freebie I thought I'd throw in there and post on a Saturday. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Prognosticate concerning kings or kingdoms' fate. I think myself to be as wise as he that gazeth on the skies. My sight goes beyond the depth of a pond, or rivers in the greatest rain, whereby I can tell that all will be well when the king enjoys his own again. There's neither swallow, dove, or dade can soar more higher, deeper weight, nor show a reason from the stars what caused this peace or civil wars. The man in the moon may wear out his shoon by running after Charles's wane, but all's to no end, for the times will not mend till the king enjoys his own again. Yes, this I can tell, that all will be well when the king enjoys his own For 40 years this royal crown hath been his father's and his own. And is there anyone but he that in the same should share of be? For who better may the sceptre sway than he that hath such right to reign?